Hello, my name is Jason Haegele. I'm the Region Agronomist for WinField United in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and I'm Lance Tarochione, Technical Agronomist for DEKALB and Asgrow in West Central Illinois.
And we're standing here on June 12th, 2020 in the Pleasant Plains answer plot. And we wanted to spend a few minutes talking with you about strategies for post-emergence herbicide applications on soybeans. So Lance, we're getting here towards the middle of June and a lot of activity potentially around spraying post-emergence applications, including XtendiMax. What are some of the things that you're seeing and some of the considerations that you would urge growers to think about as we control weeds this summer?
That's a good question, Jason, and it's certainly been a interesting season in lots of ways, both from the weather and then here lately we've had a lot of changes and confusion and controversy around dicamba applications, and thankfully we're in a position now, up until June 25th here in Illinois, that we are able to apply dicamba post, assuming that other label requirements can be followed as far as temperature and wind speed and sensitive crops and all those other restrictions that people were already familiar with. And hopefully you've set yourself up with a good solid pre-foundation. That's always a great place to start, whether you're in a dicamba system or any other system. As far as that goes, I feel having a good strong residual foundation is a great way to set yourself up for success regardless of what system you're in.
Yep. So here in our ants plot, we definitely focus on using pre-emergence herbicides, and as we're standing here currently, there aren't a lot of weeds poking through. So as we think about layering that next residual product on, what are your recommendations? Should we wait till we see some weeds emerging, or should we be proactive and get out here and get those
right
done?
No, that's great. This is a good example of a spraying a clean field, and that's something that we're not really used to post-emergence. In the last 30 or 40 years, we've been very reliant on post-emergence products, and we generally wait for weeds to get up, and we're worried about spraying too early because we're worried about having a second flush, and that's kind of what I would consider to be old school thinking, that we need to get back to relying more on those residual products. So coming out here, and this would be a perfect timing, I think, to overlay additional residual on this field before we get a lot of weeds breaking through, because especially if you're in a situation where either due to label restrictions or due to sensitive crops or just personal preferences, if you're not going to use dicamba post, then it's absolutely critical that we get that additional residual on before we have weed emergence.
Sure. So, continuing this idea of residual, we know that dicamba and XtendiMax specifically does have some residual activity. Right. For those growers who may be thinking about relying solely on residual from dicamba and potentially leaving out some other residual, what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, that would not be an ideal situation in my opinion. We're headed into a stretch here where there's not a lot of moisture in the forecast, so having dicamba in the system now for that great dry weather residual would be excellent. We consider dicamba to be a nice helper from a residual standpoint. The residual activity of dicamba does give that product additional advantages, but we don't really see it as a replacement for true residual products. So my ideal recommendation would be to come into a field like this one that we're standing in now with an application of Roundup, XtendiMax, and either Warrant or Warrant Ultra for additional residual control. Because if you look at the size of these beans today, my guess is if you came in here with just dicamba and Roundup, this field's probably going to look really nice for about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and then later in the summer you're going to start to see some stuff that you really don't want to see.
Yeah.
And hopefully getting some additional true residual on at this point in time will carry this field through to canopy to where we have a clean field season long.
Absolutely. I think that residual is going to be key, because when you think about weed species like water hemp that have that extended emergence pattern during the summer, having that residual chemistry allows us to control some of those later emerging weeds, and then also we have some challenges this year with maybe spotty fields or poor stands in places, and so we've got those holes in the field where having that residual chemistry will help control those weed flushes there and come later in the summer.
Yeah, I think I understand growers are trying to cut costs where they can, and it's always tempting to trim $10 or $15 out of your herbicide program, but sometimes the end result of that late in the season is just a field that's not as clean as you'd like to see. And the reality these days is we don't have the rescue options that we used to have. With glyphosate resistance and other challenges that we face and label restrictions, you can't just run out and fix a field in July the way you used to be able to 10 or 15 years ago.
That's right. So when we think about the post-emergence chemistries like glyphosate and dicamba, what are some of the keys to success there to maximizing the efficacy from those chemistries?
Well, I think you certainly want to, you guys are experts in adjuvants, you want to have your adjuvant package right. The fully loaded glyphosates that we sell today at Power Max and Weather Max and products like that, there's plenty of surfactant in there to optimize the efficacy of the glyphosate, but depending on what else you've got in that mix, you might want to make sure that you've got the right surfactant package for other products that are in those tank mixtures. You want to make sure that you're using a good drift control product and staying on label as far as drift reduction from a dicamba standpoint. So make sure that you've got that adjuvant package maximized for those products. Make sure that you're using plenty of water. Coverage is more important than it used to be. And a lot of products are requiring a 15 gallon per acre carrier rate. You can go above that if you want to get better coverage, maybe enable you to use larger tips that are better for drift control, and right. There's always advantages to using a higher carrier volume.
Okay. Now that's a good call out on the adjuvants. Specifically, WinField United's adjuvant recommendation for the Extend Acre is on target, so that'd be the approved DRA, drift reduction adjuvant. Class Act Meridian, the non-AMS water conditioner, and then Interlock as the third component for additional drift control and to improve coverage, especially as we get that denser canopy, the soybeans and the weeds, and getting that herbicide down in the canopy to help control some of those smaller weeds that might still be emerging.
Yeah, the extra carrier volume, gives you bigger droplet size, gives you better coverage, gives you better deposition, better, there's really no substitute for volume when it comes to getting good coverage, and you'll generally get better penetration through a canopy with larger droplets and more droplets than you will trying to use pressure to blast that spray down through a canopy. It's hard to throw a feather, as they say, and so you really want that larger droplet to crash down through that dense canopy, and hopefully we're making more applications. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it became common to see guys making applications in fields where you had knee-high weeds and you couldn't see the beans, and you had 3 levels of canopy. You had the big weeds and you had the little weeds underneath the big weeds, and you had the soybeans and the little weeds underneath the soybeans. And in a field like this that we're standing in here today, it's not really hard for the herbicide to reach the target, and that's always a better situation.
Sure. So thankfully the 2020 season is underway in most places. Looking forward to the 2021 season, what should growers be thinking about as they plan their weed management herbicide systems for next year?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. There's obviously the weed control landscape in soybeans is a little crazy right now, and there's lots of options out there. It's not like it was 15 years ago where guys just knew everything was going to be Roundup, and then it just mattered what brand of seed you were going to plant. The soybean weed control conversation has gotten more complex. There's going to be more trait stacks coming into the marketplace in the next 5 years. That's probably going to make that a little bit easier to manage, give you more options as far as what you can put over the top of soybeans. But regardless of what system you're considering for 21, I think you need to recognize that we can't rely solely on post-emergent weed control anymore. And regardless of what system you choose, we need a good residual foundation. We need overlapping residuals. We need that pre and post residual application. We need to be targeting smaller weeds. We need to be targeting earlier post-emergence applications. We need to be, if your applicator's pulling into a field and you look at the field and you go, why am I even here? This is a clean field. Then you're doing it right. If you pull into that field with a post-application, you go, oh crap, I should have been here a week ago. Those are the fields that we tend to struggle with. I don't think I've ever recall having a problem in a field with weed control because a field got sprayed too early. But I constantly am looking at fields that we have challenges in because that post-application went on too late.
Right. And I guess also, looking forward to the 2021 growing season, in some respects, depending on the field and potentially the part of the state you're in, that weed management or herbicide management system starts in the fall.
Right.
Those fall burn down applications set us up for success.
Yeah, and with a fall burn down, a good spring burn down, especially in tilled fields, we have a lot of tillage that's not what I call clean till. It's either vertical till or just very light tillage. We're not starting clean in a lot of our tilled fields, and we talk a lot about using dicamba in with your pre in clean tilled fields, and that's a challenge for guys to get their head wrapped around. Well, why would I do that? I've got tillage, I don't need a burn down. Well, if you miss some water hemp, or you miss some giant ragweed, or you miss some lamb squirt, or you miss some mare's tail, or you miss some tough to control broadleaf weeds with your tillage, then when you come back post, you've got a big mad weed basically that didn't get controlled effectively with tillage, and those really give us some challenges from a post-emergent standpoint. If you've got dicamba in that pre, it's a great dry weather hedge. Doesn't take really hardly any moisture to get residual activity from dicamba. A lot of our other true residual chemistry takes a good 3/4 of an inch of rain to get that stuff activated, and if we do have a dry spring, you've got your dicamba in your pre to kind of hold things until your true pre gets activated. Plus, it's going to help you with a lot of those tillage escape broadleaf weeds, and trying to get that message out there that there's a tremendous amount of value of with dicamba in a pre, not as a replacement for your pre chemistry, but in addition to your traditional pre chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap up, and summarize, as we go through the next 2 or 3 weeks of post-emergence herbicide applications here in Illinois, remember to add that layered residual chemistry to give us some extended control of the weeds before they even get out of the ground. And then for our true post-emergence chemistries like Roundup or Extendamax, control those weeds when they're small, when possible. Focus on coverage, and then also use the appropriate adjuvants to make sure that we're knocking those weeds down to the point where they don't get back up.
That's right.
Yep. So, thanks for your time today. I hope you learned a little bit here at the Pleasant Plains Answer Plot.